feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the DaneMoore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Tuesday afternoon. It's July 1st, and coming up on today's show, we have Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick here with us from the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and we are going to run through what has happened thus far this offseason, the Reid and Randall re-signings, Joe Ingles returning to the team, Nickeil Alexander-Walker departing for Atlanta, and Luka Garza departing for Boston. And then also we'll talk a little bit about what the Wolves have left to work with. Just a quick scheduling note, wanted to get in here before we get started. We will have this episode today, which is Tuesday. Then on Wednesday afternoon, Britt, Robson, and I will record together. But then I am heading out of town for the 4th of July weekend. So if something crazy happens this weekend, we'll have to wait until I'm back to get to that on Monday. But let's do this one now. Wolves offseason talk. Here we go. All right, we are now joined by Jace, taping this portion of the episode at 10:10 a.m. on Tuesday morning. The latest Wolves-related piece of roster news was Nickeil Alexander-Walker being signed and traded to Atlanta last night. I will talk about that. They also re-signed Joe Ingles yesterday. We're not going to start the episode with Joe Ingles talk, but that's just where we are as we hit record this morning. But Jace, I want to kind of start with the table setting to lead the episode of kind of what was the rest of the Wolves offseason, which was a few days ago, and it feels like a while ago, signing Naz Reid, signing Julius Randle, or re-signing them, and how that kind of gives us a picture of what the Cat trade looks like 9 months after it came to fruition. You had a tweet right after the deal that kind of updated the Cat trade again a year later. Julius Randle was able to be locked up long-term. Donte DiVincenzo still on the team. They got the number 17 pick from Detroit. That's Johan Beringer that they took, and the financial flexibility they got by getting off of Cat gave them the ability to re-sign Naz Reid. Now, Julius Randle and Naz Reid are going to be combined even after getting their new contracts, making slightly less than Karl Anthony Towns will a year from now. How do you just sort of look at this in terms of how your sort of perceived value of the trade was at the time, at the end of September, versus where it's at right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably not the best person to talk to because at the time I was like, I think that trade makes a lot of sense for Minnesota. For kind of that thought, of like, hey, you were going to be putting a real cap crunch with Cat. And I was a big Donte DiVincenzo fan with his time in New York. I think as much as anything, you seeing the numbers play out and seeing, I think the value that they got on Julius, where like, hey, if they're going to re-sign him, am I going to like that contract a year from now? And I do like it now a lot more than maybe I would have thought a year ago, not knowing the cap crunch we were walking into and stuff. If Julius was at $40 million a year, would I like that as much? Probably not. So if that would be your thought of what was to come, then I could see the improvement on that in general. Sure. And then the pick conveying already. I will say, like, some people view that of like, oh, it's never going to convey. The Wolves were pretty confident it was going to convey this next year. It conveyed a year earlier than they thought, but they were pretty confident it was going to be a first-round pick where everybody else is like, that's going to be seconds, all this stuff. So I liked the trade at the time. I think it's worked out pretty well for Minnesota in general because of the deals they got done alongside of that now this last week. And then obviously getting the first-round pick. 17 isn't maybe like the sexiest thing, but they really like Beringer, and we'll see what he turns into. It's kind of a lottery ticket type play. And DiVincenzo, I still think even after probably an underwhelming season, I still think some of his best basketball here is to come if he's indeed here for the beginning of the year, which I would anticipate at this point, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to look at because they're all different types of assets that you are able to have in place of Cat, right? Like Beringer is so different than, Julius, who's 30 and on a relatively, expensive contract. But I don't think you look at any of those four things and look at them to be problematic assets whatsoever. And I don't think New York, frankly, looks at Cat that way either, even though it's a very, very expensive deal. I just think when I was looking at your tweet and thinking about this, I think what's interesting about it is the value of this Cat trade can and will continue to evolve over the course of time, or what the actual value ends up being. I mean, some of that is the randomness of what is Beringer going to become. We don't know. It's kind of like the protections on the pick. Like, you have to sort of view it in the vacuum of what it was at the time when assessing the value of the trade itself. But that trade, that can evolve, because if Beringer is a starting center in the NBA in 3 years and looking like everything that Tim Connolly and Matt Lloyd have been optimistically saying over the past few days that he can be, then okay, that makes a huge difference in this, because he's on this cheap rookie contract. Dante, I think that's a known. That's even with some of his volatile play last season, you just can't complain about it that much, given how cheap his deal is. $12 million a year for the next couple of years. The Julius and Nas ones are going to be interesting for me to track over time here too, because I think they can both sort of move. And with Nas, I still think there's a lot of room here. 2 years from now, he could be also a starting caliber player, and you're like, man, $25 million a year, like, that's a really good deal. Cap going up, blah blah blah. But I think there's also a world where Nas can prove to be the somewhat inconsistent player that he really is. And then, you're looking at 25, probably never like really poorly, but you go, I don't know if that's like some sort of great asset that they have. And then, I don't know. Talk about Reid first, where you're at that, because I think the Randall one's a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, with Nas, like, I totally agree with you that in 2 years you might be like, that's a $35 million a year player. That's a starting caliber player. Look at what he brings to them every night. Like, that's fringe all-star, just like stat line production. And if it's for a really high level winning team, like, yeah, that's what he should be worth. But there's also, we have seen it. It's like the ups and downs of, like, sometimes you don't even know he's out there. Sometimes it's a little erratic offensively, where it's like, hey, he's really forcing things tonight. The defense was, I don't think the defense was very good at all last year. I thought it was a really poor defensive year from Nas Reid. And that's an end where I thought we were seeing more progression, and I didn't see it as much this last year. So if that doesn't improve, and he just kind of stays the same player he is now, because 25 to me is somewhat of a bet on where he's going. But if he stayed the same player, I'd be like, okay, maybe that's more like an 18 to 20. Because if it is still erratic, and if the defense doesn't improve, then that does smell a little bit more like a sixth man. But I also am of the belief of, like, I don't know, like, maybe if this guy in 2 years from now or whatever, like, is a starter, is like put into a starting role, he plays 30 minutes a night, I think guys can kind of grow from that as well. Just in terms of consistency, when the minutes are consistent and the role is consistent, because for him it's not. It often is like, well, we'll see how you're doing tonight. We'll see how what the opponent's giving us tonight. All these types of things that I think can contribute a little bit to the erraticness of it all. But I love Nas in terms of, this guy's improved a lot every year. He always makes strides. I just hope now for him moving forward is the stride. Okay, I've been paid now. That shouldn't be in the back of my mind at all. I'm here long term. Now, what do I need to do for us to win? That means defensively getting better. That means really creating a firm understanding of what's needed for me offensively each night, and not being scared to, like, dig into my bag of tools, but also, like, staying within myself as well, within our offense, and what we're trying to get to, and making sure that, okay, I've just chucked two. And they didn't go in. Maybe I'm not chucking a third one, trying to get myself right. Maybe I'm like, okay, what are we getting to? And I'll get my offense in other ways. That kind of stuff. Just like be more of a, on a night to night where it's like, this guy's really contributing to winning. If he does that, then I think that's like his next level up, where it'd be like, that looks like a starting player now.
So right before we started recording, Miles Turner signed a 4-year, $107 million deal with the Milwaukee Bucks.
That's a really good marker. Yeah.
Yeah. As Nas right there. So I was going to loop this into some breaking news that I don't think you see, because it just came through while you were talking there. But the Bucks waived and stretched Damian Lillard. That's how they.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So. When was the last time we saw a wave and stretch? Didn't the Wolves did it with Cole Aldridge, and everybody got.
Yeah, he had like dead money for like 3 years. I remember that.
Do you have a cap on how many people you can wave and stretch, or can you do as much as you want?
I mean, I would think. I don't think many teams do more than one.
Yeah,
the stretch provision. I don't. I don't know. Maybe you could do more than one. Do you say does Milwaukee already have one? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Yeah, no, I was just curious because Cole is the only person I remember them doing it to.
The Wolves.
That was a long time ago.
No, because it's how it works is So I think he had 2 years, $113 million left on his contract. So then that gets stretched out over double the years plus one. So that that 111 million is going to be on the Bucks books for 5 seasons, 20 some a year. That's that's a sharp penalty, but it's what allowed them to get Miles Turner at that number. So I think putting that all together and back to Nas, it's kind of like they had to do a lot to be able to pay Miles Turner that number. The Wolves, I guess you could say the Wolves had to sacrifice Nickeil Alexander-Walker in the sign and trade to to be able to get Nas, but they didn't have to sacrifice that much. And I think, Nas and Turner are different. Nas has more of upside, I think, based on his age. He has a chance, I think, to get better. Miles Turner is 30 or something like that now. There's probably not a lot of upside there, but I think that was what Turner came in at was always going to be a marker for me for both Reid and Randall of sort of like, what is this weird market going to look like? You guys are, including Turner, Reid, Randall, and Turner are all clearly more than mid-level guys. How weird is this going to get? Is Nas going to have to take his player option? I talked about that at nauseum. Is Julius going to be able to do anything? What is going to happen with Miles Turner in Indiana? And answer was weird. Like that's just how it went down.
Turner was like just national people when they did their rankings for free agent, and that's all like, what do you need, whatever, like, but just in terms of in the aggregate, Miles Turner was like the number one guy on the board for people. And he got this, but so much of that was market based because he got this and the Bucks had to bend over backwards to make it happen. Right. Like that.
Right.
That's what was so difficult to gauge about this summer in general. And with the Wolves and their negotiations of like, hey, look, like I truly do believe that they probably could have squeezed these guys a little bit more if they wanted to, and pushed them to the brink of like, do you want this or are you going to opt in? And I don't think they have any interest in that. I don't think they had any interest in Nas going into like a contract year. And again, because I think it impacted his play a little bit last year, and the same with Julius. And I think they just put a lot of emphasis on like, we'll get the best out of these guys if they're happy to be here. And I think that they've kind of tried to, there was a balance of like, there wasn't an overpay, but they did right by him, I think, in my mind, especially looking at the market and what other people got. Like, I think fair is the word I would use for both of those, frankly. And I think,
but not squeezing, not squeezing.
Correct. That's it. And I said that at the point, like when both deals came, like there could have been more, you could have like taken a little bit more off the margins and they wouldn't have really had a choice but to say yes. And I don't think that they did that in any way, shape or form. I just think they're both fair deals.
Right. And I don't remember the exact context of the Denver deals, but I do have like in my head, Will Barton when Tim Connolly was there, Michael Porter Jr.
Yeah.
And maybe the Aaron Gordon one was after Connolly that. But, all of those, it was kind of like.
You don't think they squeezed MPJ with that match?
But that's my point is it's like, I don't know. It's like seeing the upside and like breathing in the upside into the idea of
upside
of what the player could be.
And just the idea that you think guys will be motivated and you'll get the best version of them if they're content and where they are, if they're not like constantly thinking like I should have got paid more and blah, blah, blah. I should be heading into this market. Like I want to get out of here, that kind of stuff. Like that's how else do you create these good environments where everybody wants to be in the gym? Everybody wants to be around people. They want to come work out in the off season. It's like they're happy to be there. They're happy to be a part of the organization. That all factors in.
Costs you a couple percentage of the cap. And I think, again, I do think it is fair to say Tim Connolly does prioritize that over a couple million here and there. And I think to your point too, with the not having a expiring contract looming over your head, some determined finances, I think that's big for Julius too. And this is like, a year ago going into the season, I'm sure he was being given assurances from Finch and them that, you're the starter, obviously, like starting power forward. And it was Nas off the bench the whole time. But there had to be some of that going on in Julius's head, right? Of like, am I just in Minnesota purgatory for a year? What is it? And I would imagine that this shifts some stuff mentally in Randall's head, which, to be fair, I think that shift happened at the end of the season when he played well. But part of the downside is I was just like, kind of going through downsides with this contract for Randall in my notes. I was like, well, there is just some emotional volatility. There's some volatility to the play. And I think being locked up at least curbs that a little bit. I also just had down for like upsides. What was the alternative? And there are people out there that are frustrated with Randall. And I think a downside is questions about fit and maybe being stuck with this type of fit. And so the alternative would be changing that fit. But what is the other piece that you're getting back in that, what fit issues or cap issues or player type issues are going to happen there? I just kind of, no matter what the number was with Randall after they didn't trade for Kevin Durant, I was just like, I don't know. You kind of have to re-sign this guy because what are the alternatives? And you do preserve at a minimum this salary slot, this $30 million a year that you could trade in the future when another Kevin Durant or somebody else that you want more, that you fits your timeline better presents themselves. But yeah, that was the first thing I wrote down. I was just like, what's the alternative? And that's not bagging on Julius. It's just what I don't know. That has to be how we assess it.
What was the alternative specifically this offseason? Like there just was there was no way. I think if somehow, like, I don't think this was really even in play, but like if somehow Julius turned down his player option and went into free agency, like you weren't signing somebody else for anything. Like you were going to be a worse basketball team next year. Like in my mind, that was just a clear thing. And is that a spot where you want to be in right now? Like when you're at Rudy, probably in the last year or two of like high level effectiveness and all of that. Like I just, that to me, I'm with you. It makes no sense of like, once the Durant thing was done, like Julius being here and seeing where continuity gets you and seeing like, okay, these two key pieces aren't on contract years anymore. And we get another year of our younger guys growing and developing and maybe stepping into larger roles. And we see what issues that maybe solves within our roster. Like, I mean, the biggest jump, and other people have made this point, but the biggest jump this team has made in the last 4 years was when they didn't do a thing in the offseason approaching the 23-24 season, and just continuity was king. And like, you just saw them come out of the gates of like gangbusters. It was like, wow, this is like a connected group. That was the most connected basketball I've seen the Timberwolves play in my life. What they did 2 years ago. And there was like same purpose, goal, all of it. And they all had a pretty good idea of what was expected of them and how they were going to achieve it. And like, that was basically the only time that this team hasn't been majorly turned over since Chris Finch has been here. Like, and then they turned it over again, but now you can kind of run it back, and not all the pieces will be the exact same, but pretty close. And you see if you can have the same effect. And that frankly, at that point was kind of the only pathway, I think, to taking a step, was just being like, let's see if some familiarity here and guys maybe having a good idea of what's expected of them and what needed to improve for them to better fit in what we had. That makes sense to me.
Right. You bring up continuity and the way that they won't have continuity. Let's kind of shuffle up the order of what I sent you there, but let's talk about the Nikhil sign and trade to Atlanta. We'll grab a break, and then we'll be back with Jace to talk about the Nikhil Alexander-Walker sign and trade. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and there is plenty going on over at Falling Knife this week. Tonight, Tuesday night, they will be showing the Lynx and Indiana Fever game in the tap room, 7 p.m. tip for that one. They'll have the game, as they do all Lynx games, on the projection screens and playing through the speakers. Wednesday night, they got Trivia Mafia from 7:30 to 9:30. Then Thursday night, another Lynx game, Mystics Lynx on Thursday night. That'll be playing in there, while also the Initials game is going on in the tap room from 7:30 to 9:30. And then on Friday, the 4th of July, Falling Knife will be open from noon to 6 p.m. if you want to head over there before going to the fireworks or something. Loaded week at Falling Knife here in town. Would love it if you checked out Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis for some trivia, great beer, and some Lynx games this week. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. We'll put that up on the screen here because we do have that Lynx and Fever game this evening. I'm looking at it on there right now. Great time to put together a Prize Picks lineup. No Caitlin Clark in that game, but I'm saying Nafisa Collier has more or less than 23.5 points up there for her pick, which she's actually done 4 of the last 5 games, but that is actually discounted as a promotion down to just 18 points tonight. So we want to get that one in your lineup for sure. Kayla McBride is at 14.5 points. She had 20 the other night against Connecticut. even with the NBA season over, there's still plenty of ways to play over at Prize Picks. WNBA, MLB, soccer, tennis, golf, the 4th of July hot dog eating contest. Yeah, that's on there too. All you need to do is put 2 or more picks in your lineup to win. If you don't have a Prize Picks account, all you have to do is put in the promo code DANE when you sign up, and you will receive $50 in lineups when you place your first $5 lineup. That's prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app using code DANE when you create your account. All right, Jace. So where the continuity breaks for the Wolves from last season's team is they no longer have Nickeil Alexander-Walker. He was signed and traded to the Atlanta Hawks on last night for a 4-year, $62 million deal. He has a player option in the last year of that, a trade kicker. They wanted him. They're throwing the book at what they could give to be able to get him back, and they toss the Wolves a 2027 second-round pick from Cleveland in the process for facilitating the deal. The Wolves generate a $7 million trade exception in the process as well. Those are marginal assets and stuff, and we can talk about maybe some of the utility of those things. But I think the number one most relevant thing, and we forget about this sometimes in the midst of transaction season, is the basketball. And they're not going to have Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and that's next season is probably going to be more relevant than a $7 million trade exception or a second-round pick from Cleveland. I mean, how do we think the Wolves are going to miss him? There is Clark and Shannon and Dillingham in the pipeline, but how much is this going to disrupt continuity, if at all?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I've just been looking at who's going to be there at 55 in 2027. Those trade exceptions. Yeah. Those trade exceptions, I mean, they barely get used. I know Atlanta used it, but they hardly ever. They usually just kind of fade into nothing. Not so you can't.
I effed that up last night. Initially, I tweeted out it was going to be a $14 million trade exception,
which I was like, okay, that's something. Yeah.
But I forgot the trade exceptions. I edited my tweet, and they're 50% of the outgoing money. So if Nickeil's deal's like 15 million, it'll be $7.5 million in a trade exception. I mean, to your point, the Wolves got like a $4.5 million trade exception for signing and trading Kyle Anderson to the Warriors last year. I don't even think on this podcast we've even talked about that trade exception, one time over the past 12 months. It's basically like a little tool to use. If
there's no impact
sort of situation.
There's no impact. It doesn't help you with the aprons, anything like that. Like you're still taking on the salary. It's just, like you still have to pay for it. But you can do it, and mathematically you literally wouldn't have been legal. But Nickeil, like I think it's a big thing it just puts all the pressure on the young guys. And like, they do have a number of guys who are options to fill some of these things. But the thing about them is all of those guys do some of what Nickeil does. And I don't think any of them are like replacements for Nickeil. And that's what's interesting is, like Nickeil was like the most consistent approach. Maybe the results would go up and down sometimes, but just as like approach to the game and taking every night seriously and wanting to put his best foot forward and like, whether that be film study, all this game plan discipline, like that guy was on it. And that was huge for them because it's something that they've lacked sometimes. And he was kind of a pillar of like, I'm going to do things the right way. I know what we're trying to do here, all this kind of stuff. And just playing hard and just a really good locker room presence. And then like, defensively, you could put him on the team's best player whenever he was out there. And then, he did run some point for them and ball handling and was really good at playing off the catch and did a lot of really good things. And like I said, like Jalen Clark, good defender. We saw him knock down some shots. Like beyond that, we don't know. Terrence Shannon, excellent playing in transition. I think a pretty good offensive player. We saw like some sparks of defense, but I think if he's put on like the other team's really good player, like how is he going to hold up to that? We don't know. Rob, obviously the point guard stuff is there. And then we know the other question marks of like, how consistent can the shooting be? And like, can he just kind of keep the offense flowing when he's out there? Like, I don't know, turnover, the big, right. So like, it's a bunch of guys who it's like, well, he can do that. He can do that. He can do that. But you can kind of package it all into one with Nickeil, and you can't play all those three guys as one player out there on the court. So like that, they'll probably, at least to start the year, unless those guys take another major step forward, like it's hard to not look at that and be like, they're probably a little worse in that spot in the rotation next year, at least out of the gates.
Yeah, I think to glass half full from a consistency of approach standpoint, I do think Jalen Clark and Terrence Shannon Jr. will bring that. That's the sense I get from both of them, but that is very different than being what Nikhil is, which was a more multifaceted player, or a multifaceted player that we've seen, and the consistency of approach. I don't know. I mean, I'm really excited to see Shannon in summer league, and I mean, he dominated last year, so he probably will again. So probably don't want to get totally carried away with it.
I'm not, because I think he's going to score 25 points, and I'm not going to think anything of it. That.
I guess I just want to. It's just a really important piece, Last year, and and we're talking about this in the context of the relevance of summer league, which is with all the grains of salt. But I thought he was a relevant piece to be watching at summer league last year, because remember at the time it looked like he was going to kind of be the 8th, 9th man, maybe, or 9th man in the rotation, and then the DiVincenzo and Randall thing happens and all that. But it's even more relevant. His role going in next season. Yeah.
We've done this for so many guys. Like, they took out Cat. Julius came in. Just Dante is the only additional piece. And we're like, and this team throughout the year was like, Joe was going to play a big role, and then we got Dante DiVincenzo. Rob was going to play, and then we got Dante DiVincenzo. Terrence Shannon was going to play. And I was like, wow, Dante must have played 100 minutes a game. Like, so like, some of these guys weren't going to play. I don't know. Like, and the early season thing tells you that it probably was going to be Joe over Shannon. Just in that they tried to play Joe early
on. Minot, man. I remember
Minot. You're right.
Like, he's going to play.
Yeah, Minot.
You've been telling me that.
Yes,
and
yeah. I guess that was even Chris Finch was kind of raving about him in training camp and whatnot. Like, there was a lot of smoke there, But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think Shannon's going to be great in summer league. I'm not sure where I'm going to learn from that.
Right. That's maybe the point.
Because he was great a year ago, and like, was he going to do the same thing? Like, dominate. Okay, I'm more interested to see Rob in summer league, probably. Like, how does he play within the context of it? Those kinds of things.
Well, and that's super relevant to Nikhil here too, because I know Nikhil wasn't a point guard, but he played 25 minutes a night. I mean, what percentage of those minutes were point guard? I don't know, a quarter of them maybe. So there's certainly a even larger gap in point guard than they had last season, just because Nikhil's gone. So I think Dillingham is, if we're talking about like stitching the Nikhil Alexander Walker role all together, I'm not with those three players, I'm not sure you need all three of them to have like a great year to work, but I do think Rob has to work. That because Shannon can't do the point guard play, Clark can't do the point guard play. Ant is really the point guard on this team too. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. But you don't want Dante to do it. I don't think that's the best version of Dante if he's doing it, frankly.
I think he got the shot. I mean, that's what it looked like this year, at least, of like, that isn't the best utility of him, and it's not the best utility of his skill set, obviously, because
you're getting a worse player. You're getting a worse player if you're putting that on his plate, in my mind.
Which means Rob has to go. Like, they need Rob to go. Part of letting Nikhil Alexander Walker go is Rob Dillingham really stepping up and taking advantage of a greater opportunity than he had last season. It's not going to need to be 25 minutes a game like Nikhil played, because you do have Shannon and Clark, but like, he's got to be a piece of that.
Yeah, and like, Mike is another year older. So do you even want to reel back a little bit more? And like, is Mike has to miss any time? Like, Rob has to be ready to go, because there's going to be probably going to be segments of the season somewhere along the line here. Nobody puts more time and effort into like their daily routine to make sure that they're good to go than Mike Conley. But like, the odds say at some point, like, there's going to be a 3-week span or something where you probably won't have them. So Rob's probably like one of the key tipping points for this season, and especially now, as we've seen, like, anybody who you thought might be like a budget backup point guard, like, that well's running pretty dry already here on day 2, like, without any more news coming in. Like, looking at, here's the best available, I was like, oh my god. No, like, Chris Paul is not coming here. Like, everything he said is, I got to be close to where my family is. Yeah, like, yeah, the Jones brothers are gone. Like, there's not. You look at options, they might get somebody, but it's not going to be somebody where you're like, oh, I actually like that person to fill in for 15 minutes a game.
Well, okay, so I'm thinking about it too, of like, if I am a point guard out there and free agency, and even like a taxpayer mid-level guy, like more than the minimum guy, I'm not sure what role the Wolves have to offer free agent point guard X. And I know you can look at the Wolves depth chart and be like, that's a need. And maybe it's even more of a need without Nikhil. But I'm just putting myself, like, let's say it was Tyus Jones, right? Like, do you sign?
Okay, let's just say right now,
say
it's Malcolm Brogdon. Like that,
sure.
I mean, like that's one of the only available people left on like a list where you go, I don't know who that is.
If you were Malcolm Brogdon, do you take that?
I think that you would. I think if you dove deeper into it, there are more pathways, but it's just not guaranteed. And that's something where like a veteran player who's like, I'm signing here for a year or something, like I don't want a non-guaranteed thing, because then if it doesn't turn out and the Wolves roster stays perfectly healthy and Rob Dillingham actually comes along the way that they hope, now I didn't play all year and who knows what I'm doing next year. Like, am I still in the NBA? Like those kinds of things. So yeah, that's why I wouldn't sign here. But I do think there are avenues of where, hey, something that Mike gets a little banged up or Rob just isn't working out to where now they're like, hey, we want to win this year. Like
I said to Kyle, like the Monte Morris thing from 2 years ago.
Correct. Yeah. That's a good fit of like, it's an option, you know,
but maybe not expecting to be in the rotation every night. I don't know. That's kind of the level of point guard role available. So I think if you're a free agent point guard, you got to know that that's probably the role available here, is not every night backup point guard minutes. Because Mike, I know Pike's going to play.
Yeah.
Ant's going to function as the one a lot. Rob's going to play. You know, that is probably 48 right there of point guard minutes between the three of them, or close to it. So,
and I'll say, like, that's risky if you want to contend for a championship. Like, that's risky, but it's the reality. Yeah.
Could be a wait to the deadline sort of thing too.
See where you're at. Yeah. See how things have come along.
What else is made more available? Because like you said, it's a dismal sort of group right now.
Yeah.
And that trade exception, that could be where that trade exception comes through. They have that $7 million. You know, is there a?
Did you say that 7? Who just signed for 7?
Tyus. Yeah, doesn't work out in Orlando. You know, come home.
Phased out of the rotation because they just go defensive heavy. You know. Yeah.
We're only playing 6'8" dudes.
Yeah.
Other piece of quote unquote continuity lost. Luka Garza signs with the Boston Celtics. Obviously, wasn't a part of the continuity of the rotation. He rarely played, but did get opportunities every year when bigs were hurt to get spot minutes in the rotation here and there. I think all of us had like some curiosities with Luka, while very much understanding the downside defensively. I mean, that Bulls game,
that was bad.
Is burned into, my memory of Luka Garza defensively. The Celtics are probably like, just don't look at that. We're just gonna forget about that one. But I always thought, like, with Luka, if and when they wanted to lean more into a 5-out look, that it would, that he could make sense on the Wolves someday. And I think with the Celtics, like, that's the offense that they run. Like, he's gonna, if and when he plays for them, is gonna have the opportunity to provide value as a spacing 5 at times, that hopefully covers up for some of the defensive value lost there. I'm curious to see what Boston's roster all looks like and stuff, but I could see him playing, and I could see him being in a team that shot more threes than anybody ever a season ago. They're thirsty for threes. Luka Garza is thirsty for shooting, period. Like, I don't know. I feel like in fantasy football, when you're like, all right, last round of the draft, got to draft my tight end.
Yeah. Yep. Who can score a touchdown?
Yeah.
Who,
right.
Who can fall into the end zone 6 times?
Gary Barnage. I could put him. I would place a little stock on Luka Garza in Boston. Not super relevant, for the Wolves and rotation and everything, but I think was a piece of the cultural building here over the last 3 years. Everybody, players, coaches, executives, raved about him. I mean, that in his time here. So good for him, and excited to see what he's going to be able to do there. But it makes sense from a Wolves standpoint to move on to, I think.
I'm excited to see how many times I hear his name mentioned on a certain national podcast over the next 2 years. Is it like 1,000? like that. I'm actually looking forward to that. Yeah, like a 14-point game or whatever, and I know I'll get to hear about it 2 days later on a podcast. Like that's exciting to me. Yeah. I mean, the thing with the piece of it. I mean, Chris Finch said this a lot whenever he'd ask about it.
1,000.
Maybe I'm not even put the line there. Yeah. Start jotting it down every time. There's something like the veteran leaders are cool, and Joe Ingles has a lot of value for that from Minnesota in the locker room. And certainly you want veteran leaders who are on the court. Mike Conley's directing guys around, but Luka Garza gave them like that rare, hey, young guys developing. Luka is playing and stay in shape league with you. Luka is oftentimes like on your end of the court, like as you're doing your types of drills and stuff and individual development. And he's doing everything the right way. And he's got like this routine and like getting like this program and everything that you want to do if you develop as a player, like follow what Luka does, who's right next to you, doing it all alongside of you. Like that had to be a massive aid in development. And they thought it was for their younger guys who I think now are to the point where like, hey, they should have their routines and see what to do now for how long, like they've been here for over a year in terms of like Terrence and Rob, and Jalen Clark's been here for a couple now. And so they've had a first chance look at like, okay, if I do what Luka does, I should be in good shape. I think that played a lot of value for them as they had this, and Leonard Miller, like the specific core of guys who they've been trying to like build up into rotational pieces. And
Nate Knight.
They've
battles. Nate Knight, Luka Garza battles.
Yeah, I just think they loved having somebody who was a very good example in specifically working with that group. And I think he served a lot of value there. And now, we'll see. Like, hey, Luka will know what's going to be.
You don't think like he'll play? I feel like he'll play next year.
No, he's going to play. I'm saying how he's going to do. Like that's what I'm curious. I like that they have capable wing defenders.
Yes.
He's going to get called into a million pick and rolls, but
yeah, that's true.
That'll be fascinating to see what they do coverage wise. Or because couldn't you see like 10 games in them being like, I hope it works, but I could see 10 games in being like, we can't do this. We're getting cooked, and then it just goes away and you're like, we tried. But I could also see it being like, actually, it's not as bad as we thought defensively. He's actually turned into a great offensive piece for us. All of that. So I don't know. That's what I'm saying. We'll see. I don't know which way it's going to go. I could see it going really good or really bad, and I'm intrigued and I'm excited for him to have the chance to prove it one way or another.
I'd add to Nikhil too. Like, I think it's nice for him to be on a team where he isn't the best perimeter defender, too. And so it's kind of like
yep.
To keep doing stupid football analogies, like the wide receiver too. That's like on a different team they'd be the primary option. I think Atlanta having Dyson Daniels is a nice thing there, where then you could do what you did with Jaden, where you don't maybe need to put Dyson on the ball 100% of the time. You can have Nikhil be your screen navigator, something like that, because I think the world of Nikhil's defense from an effort and execution standpoint, but the defensive talent level isn't like immense for him in the way that it is for Daniels and McDaniels, because they're just bigger and more physically talented than Nikhil will. But I was looking at that, Bobby Marks like tweets out the little depth chart sort of thing. And I'm like, oh, I really like the fit of Nikhil Alexander-Walker in Atlanta. And I understand why they pursued him as hard as they did. And to a much lesser extent, that was the first thing I thought of with Garza too. I'm like, well, if it's going to work, it'll probably work in a system that loves to bomb threes and has a ton of good perimeter defenders, or the odds of it increase there. So two fun guys, I think, for both of us to cover. Go ahead.
With Nikhil, I still think physicality is the trait that I would like most in a defender, like a Lou Dort kind of thing. I think that's the thing that preventing guys from even getting to their spots. I think, and Nikhil doesn't necessarily have that in spades. So that's where I think even like Dyson Daniels is a little better with that. Certainly, like disruption is still his biggest thing defensively. But yeah, and like you talk about having multiple guys out there, the biggest thing is like, yeah, you want somebody who can stop the other team's best wing scorer, but like if you can also then put somebody on the point guard and disrupt them just getting into the flow of their offense, like that's why having two is so dynamic. Of like, yeah, we'll make it hard for your first option, but we're also going to make it hard just for you to get into whatever you want to do. And that combination it makes for the best defenses. And Well,
it's like, let's do it if they play the Hawks and it's like Ant is out there and DiVincenzo's at the 1, right? Or something like that. Right. And you put Daniels on Ant and then you put Nikhil on DiVincenzo, or even, Dillingham while
and
he's
Trey,
doing it.
and Trey on Jaden, or
sure.
Probably.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. We'll get to the bench. Well, Nikhil's going to come off the bench there. But yeah, anyways, I like the fit of both those guys. They're good. I mean, we covered them for both of them for a while. It feels like, and
they were really good guys.
Yeah,
like and we obviously don't fully know players. Like you can fake it for 20 minutes or whatever. But all my sense, talking to everybody else, and my own personal experiences, were two really good guys to have in the locker room. Helped build the identity of like a positive vibes team that people wanted to walk into the locker room and spend time in.
Speaking of positive vibes, let's do some Joe Ingles. That was kind of the, I guess, more surprising piece of news thus far for the Wolves offseason. I don't think we knew if Joe was going to be back in the league this year, period, if it was retirement or if he'd be back with the Wolves. They did sign him to a minimum contract. If you saw the Shams tweet, it said like $3.6 million. Explained it all on Twitter if you want to look at it. But it only counts as a minimum contract, counts as $2.2 million. So no matter what, we're going to have to fill up the final roster spot with a player at the minimum. They chose to give it to Joe Ingles at the minimum. Could have they maybe got somebody else with some more upside at the minimum? Maybe. Maybe that could have happened, but with Ingles, which I think is another Conley pattern of behavior, is like that last guy on the bench. They want it to be a player who's just cool with not playing and won't cause any problems, because they don't. It was the same thing with PJ Dozier a year ago. We're like, what? They signed PJ Dozier? Conley knew him from his time in Denver and knew he was just looking to get back into the NBA. And so I think it's the same thing there with Ingles. The downside, I guess, is it just takes a roster spot, but I don't think they view it as a downside at all, and they do prioritize that value of a veteran presence, good vibes. I think connects and coaches with other players as a player, which has a unique value there too. So, I mean, I got it. I'm not like blown away by the deal, but I don't know. It's the last spot on the roster.
Basically. To me, it was very much like a cementing of we're running it back with continuity, and we liked like what we had in the locker room, and we want to maintain all of the aspects of that. And we're still pretty committed to this Rudy Mike thing for at least another year. And Joe obviously kind of helps with that build of the team. All of that. And like you said, at the end of the bench spot thing, like you have Clark, Shannon, and Rob, and realistically, two of those guys are going to get minutes, right? Like one fills in for Nikhil, and then and then there are probably a few spare extra minutes that one of the other ones can grab. And that's about it. Like one of those three isn't going to play on a night-to-night basis. And then you have Leonard Miller, who they probably, feel like can contribute if and when the time comes, ideally.
Maybe.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. But you already have guys where it's like, they're not going to play, they're not going to play, they're not going to play. So what's adding another guy who's probably not going to play? Like you'd have to, it's to the point now where it's like, well, 3 injuries, then we would have to play this guy, okay, probably pretty screwed if that's the point anyway, like that's like people are like, oh man, what a mess Dallas got in. And I agree, they did a lot of dumb things last year, but like, oh man, we didn't have enough bodies. It's like, yeah, they went from like really screwed to really, really screwed. Like I guess. I'm totally with that of like, hey, if one of the things you're valuing most is continuity and like everybody feeling good about the team and the locker room and all of that, and Joe Ingles was a big part of it, I wrote this today. I remember early March, they played a game and they played well. And I was like, asking Finch, or maybe they didn't, I don't remember, but I asked Finch, I was like, how do you guys play like your best game more consistently than you have been? And he's like, yeah, we need somebody to like kind of take that by the horns or whatever. And I was like, who is that? I was expecting like Aunt Julius or whatever. And he's like, we've got some good leadership. Like Joe Ingles has been really good for that type of stuff. And I was like, oh, Joe Ingles is captaining the ship here. Okay. And
he wanted him to be Kyle Anderson so bad.
And I think
and there wasn't the rotation spot available.
Right.
But Joe probably wasn't ready to take on that role either. It didn't look like it when he did get the opportunity.
Right, but that's fine in the fact that sometimes, especially with this team, like you do just need people who are willing to speak up in the locker room, be like, "You're not doing the right things right now."
Yeah,
Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, whoever, and Mike even said it in the
Joe's got
playoffs.
no fear on that.
Yeah,
Like,
none,
he's
zero. You know,
Yeah.
and frankly, like it's just a co-captain for Mike of like, "You're not doing this," and Joe's like, "Yeah, you're not." You know, like that kind of stuff. I remember in the playoffs, it was like attention to detail, blah blah blah. I asked Mike about it, and he's like, "Joe and I are on people about it every single day."
Yeah,
and, you know, it helps to have two guys who trust each other, who can do that stuff, who can kind of echo what the coaches are saying, all of that. So I do think there's value to it, especially like you said, it's minimum at the end of the bench, like for somebody else who wasn't going to play.
Right.
If we're just being honest, you know.
Today's show is brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company, and we know there are a chunk of you out there who have a home improvement project to get done this summer. We would love it if you made Your Home Improvement Company your answer to that project. Right now, they are offering a buy 2 windows, get 2 windows free deal on triple pane windows that come with a lifetime warranty and are installed by certified professionals. Your Home Improvement Company also specializes in transforming outdated bathrooms. They're still offering that 30% off deal on bathroom remodels this month. Their bathroom renovations are also done by certified local professionals. And whatever the project is, Your Home Improvement Company offers great financing deals that require zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. Contact Your Home Improvement Company by calling 866-777-YHIC or by going to yourhomeimprovementco.com. It's Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. And
upside for what? Upside for what? If they're available for the minimum they want to sign here, like I don't have that much upside. Like just being realistic.
What was the number one thing that stood out in Finch's exit interviews at the end of the season, on the day after? It was like, our game plan discipline was not there to be a championship level team, and that, that has to change. And the players, to your point of what you just said before, that he always would point to that understood that stuff were Mike Conley and Joe Ingles. And I get it. Those guys are old. Like, they're 38 and they're nowhere near what they were when they were in Utah. But they give you that thing that the coach is saying is your team's biggest need. Yet the reaction to Joe Ingles is like, what the hell? Wasted roster spot. And with Mike Conley right now, the other piece of conversation right now is like, can't go into the season with Mike Conley being your starting point guard. There's lacking this at the point guard position, and it's pointing at Conley, it's pointing at Joe. And I mean, I get some of that, but the coach is saying, and I think we are seeing when we watch this team, that the biggest thing that they need is what Joe Ingles and Mike Conley provide on the floor and or in the locker room there. So I get them prioritizing that, because I think Finch is right that this team is lacking in that area right now.
You can say a lot of things about like what they need offensively and whatnot. I still will never not think that last year's team just didn't bring it defensively on a night-to-night basis enough. Like, yeah, they were good, but it didn't even come close to imitating who they were in 23-24. And the closest they got to that all season, like in a big moment, was game 3 against the Thunder. And then game 4, it just like the ball pressure and whatnot dissipated again. And you could say scheme or whatever, but like Anthony Edwards at the first quarter of game 3 set a tone of like, we're on your ass today. Like, and that was just, and it was that he was all over the court. Like, he was just like in the girls. And it was like, oh, I remember Ant doing this a lot more in the past defensively, and actually being like the so many more moments that would go viral and be like, this is one of the best defenders in the NBA
as a catalyst.
Yeah. And we would be like, he's not that, but man, his peak is, and the peak just wasn't reached. And that was true for a lot of guys. And so much of that does come down to like attention to detail and the want to, and just people like kind of getting on you, like, we need that. And then you just saw in game 4 again with the Thunder, it was like, back to what we were doing. Like, we'll just try to outscore them. And that's just not going to be this team in my mind, of like how they're going to reach a championship height. But they just need people to get on them. Because I remember asking Finch ahead of game 5, I was like, where was the ball pressure in game 4 that we saw in 3? And he's like, yeah, we watched the film, and that was the biggest thing that jumped out to us of like, where did this go? And so I am still a firm believer of like, this team has a lot of what it needs if it wants to be that. And they need more guys who understand what they need to be. And even if they're guys who don't play, of understanding, here's who we have to be if we actually want to be the best team in the NBA. And anybody who can mimic that message from the coaches on down, I think the better for them.
Yeah, and they need to tighten the screws. And I think that's a clear piece of intention by what they're saying, what the moves they're making are doing. And I don't think it's something, to believe like can't happen. I do think that often comes with age. I think Ants obviously has a tendency to get distracted and stuff like that, but to give Ant a little bit of a break too, there is so much of the offensive workload. There are ways to like repurpose it, reprioritize where you're tightening the screws. Ant, we need you defensively. We need you to be running the point here again, that discipline to game plan. And I think with Jaden and Nas in particular, I think those are two guys who can up their game plan discipline just in the traditional arc of like, here we are, we're coming into our prime. We've played in playoffs. We're understanding what the things are that drive winning. And yeah, maybe when we were 22, 23, we weren't prioritizing that at all. Like,
and you've gotten paid,
yes,
both of them now.
Right. Boom. I think that's the thing. And Jaden, frankly, I think is typically pretty good at that, but he just, to me, would have even more room for that simply because he's 24 years old and is still learning as anybody who's 24 in the league was, and Ant too. So yeah, it remains. I think that's the biggest swing factor of the whole thing for next season, more so than the moves that they do or don't do this offseason. When we talk about increasing this team's ceiling or even just increasing the amount of games that they win during the regular season, it's first and foremost about game plan discipline and repeating that over and over. And I know that's not sexy. It sounds boring or whatever, but I don't know, man. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to compete with the top of this Western Conference, which I want to talk about now, of Houston and Denver and other teams making strides, and Houston up into that class that the Wolves deserve to be into because they went to the Western Conference Finals. But this Denver team, what they're doing, and they just traded for Jonas Valanciunas apparently. So they have him too, on top of Cam Johnson and the Michael Porter Jr. trade that they made. Houston has done a ton to round out their roster. Where are you just we'll start with Denver. I mean, kind of instant reaction.
For Saric, so they had to have thrown something else in there.
Yeah, there's definitely. Yeah.
Although I could see Vivek being like, Saric can shoot, I think. I could see that. I wanted him 5 years ago. We can get him right now. Yeah, I mean, I really like it's just another like legitimate rotational piece. Like, no offense to Denver, but like so often like we can't just go out there with no backup center tonight. Like, okay, DeAndre Jordan, like dust you off, get out there. Like, what? In an NBA game?
Huge solution to the non-Jokic menace.
Yeah. Like, he legitimately. And I thought they were going to go more and more like wing, power forward, whatever. But don't you just another guy who can play 15 minutes that are like legitimate basketball. And they have been lacking that for forever. And
they had nothing else.
Cam Johnson
backup big
is a better defender than Michael Porter Jr. is by a fair amount. And frankly, like, probably a little bit more like with playmaking and stuff. So like, I think he can kind of diversify what they do offensively while still maintaining that shooting element they desperately needed with Porter.
And even if he can't, it freed up 17 million more.
Yeah.
Porter's making 38, Johnson's making 21, something like that.
Yeah. And Bruce Brown, we've seen it. Like, he knows it's very easy to play with Jokic, but Bruce Brown's very good at it. And even as these last couple of years on kind of these terrible teams, and obviously he wasn't playing at the impact level that he was getting paid for these last 2 years, like, Bruce Brown was still playing decent basketball every time that we saw him. I can't say I was watching the Raptors and the Pelicans or whatever, but every time we saw him, I'd be like, he still got that pop in his game. And I think I would be surprised.
The delta is off of freaking Hunter Tyson or Jalen Pickett, like,
right.
Julian Strawther. Those are the current options.
Talk yourself into Julian Strawther, and then you plays, and it's like, not an NBA player, like, or an end of bench NBA player, and that's. Yeah, I mean, they've got NBA players, which, like, I say this with Giannis too. Like, these guys Jokic and Giannis are so good that it doesn't take very much for you to be a really good team. Like, I understand that you're cap strapped in all these situations because these guys make so much, but like, to be decent, you just need NBA players out there. Yeah. And Denver has added a few of them, and Denver's dangerous, man. And I think you talk about Houston and Denver, and I think this was just a good gauge. Just put up like the FanDuel, whatever, like just a pull up odds to win the West, and it was maybe it's even changed since those deals. I don't know, but
I'm pulling up. Yeah, I'm looking at it too.
okay. So in this one, it has. Wow. Okay, that one's kind of weird. The other one is stupid because it has the Clippers and the Lakers.
The Valanciunas deal literally just went through. I don't know how much that swings things.
Probably not, but I'm not going off one that has the Lakers and Clippers ahead of the Wolves. Okay, here you go. On DraftKings, it's the Thunder at plus 150 to win the West, the Rockets at plus 450, the Nuggets at plus 700, and the Wolves at plus 800. And I think that's fairish. You can say, oh, I think the Wolves should be ahead of the Nuggets, whatever. But I think that in general ballpark is fair.
Well, okay, so go tier 1 OKC, tier 1 by themselves.
Yep.
How big is tier 2, and are the Wolves in it? I think that's the question now of, has Houston and Denver elevated themselves to tier 2 by themselves, or are the Wolves in tier 2 with them?
I think the Wolves are in the Nuggets tier. I'm just trying to decide if the Rockets are maybe a tier above Minnesota.
Okay, yeah.
Because I don't know, because you could say the Rockets lost first round last year. I promise you, if Steph Curry strained his calf, that the Rockets would have beaten the Warriors. I will make that vow now. So you can say whatever you want about, the Wolves went to the West Finals, the Rockets got bounced for round 1. Like, they didn't play the same teams. So they might have been in the same tier. Who knows how Rockets Wolves series would have went last year. The Rockets have definitely gotten pieces that just fit their team. Not even just KD, like Dorian Finney-Smith's really good role player, as we saw in that Lakers series.
Now.
They are very deep. They can take on a lot. Like, they have young guys who are getting a year older, just like the Wolves. And so I don't think that's crazy to say that they might be tier 2.
I
think they might be tier 2 on their own. I really think. And then I would put Denver and Minnesota as their own tier 3, and then other teams below that. I don't think any other teams.
I don't think anybody else deserves to be. Yeah, I mean, of course, other things could happen, but the next ones are like Lakers, maybe Clippers, but I don't think they deserve to. I think those teams all deserve to be, a tier down from that again as of July 1st in the morning here. But yeah, I think point being that second tier, if we call it, or just the 1, 2, 3, 4 in the West, the home court teams, I think it's going to be tougher this year than it was a year ago. I don't know. I probably would say that no matter what. There's definitely recency bias, and like when these moves, like Kevin Durant.
But just none of the contending teams got worse. That's the biggest thing. And even the ones below them didn't get worse. The Warriors lost Looney. Maybe they'll lose Kuminga, but maybe if they somehow
Memphis, maybe is lower. I don't know.
Sure, but I didn't even consider them one, frankly. Even though they were for large chunks of last year. But I mean, it's like Denver just getting better from what it was already a very high baseline, and probably like a renewed hunger to win again. I think too.
There's been a change of scenery there. I don't know if that's the right term. Change of trees in the scenery. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
Group.
Right. And that seems to fit pretty well around Jokic. And like I said, everybody can, but just literally bringing in NBA bodies and the Rockets got everything that you would say they need this and this and this. They've gotten it, in my mind. And then the Thunder are the Thunder, and we know how hard it is to repeat because they just played. I mean, they just got done playing last week. They literally played 3 more weeks than the Wolves did, even though they went one more round. Like, they have you have hardly any offseason. Then you got to come back and do it again with maybe not the same level of motivation to do so. Like, that's why it's so hard to do that. But it's still a team that you will have to fight tooth and nail to get out in the playoffs if you play them. Yeah, it's not going to be easy. And Minnesota was an imperfect team a year ago, and they aren't adding much, and they're losing a piece, and so it's an internal development, so they will probably be counted out by people heading into this next season because it's not going to be a sexy pick at all. If you're
because they're not going to bake in the internal development. They're not going to bake in internal development. It is, and the external perception, which isn't wrong, but the external perception is going to be that Nickeil Alexander-Walker was the best 8th man in the NBA last season, which is probably true. And that in and of itself will make people be like, oh, that's a huge gap to fill. And I think the reality is what we talked about at the beginning is that they're not going to be able to fill that cup up all the way, but they have ingredients, to get there for most of it. Plus, You factor in some internal development for McDaniels. Edwards should be better next season. Dillingham almost certainly will. Like, it's not like, even if the Wolves round this out and the last roster spot is a minimum contract, or it's nothing to speak of, and this is just kind of what the team is, I don't think you push the Wolves down, or to whatever degree you push down by Nikhil being gone. I do think you can make the argument that you push back up due to some of this internal development and continuity, or at least I think that's their belief internally. And I can't really argue with that much. You know, I think that's fair.
I don't think the Wolves have gotten worse. If anybody else is joining or passing them, it's because they've gotten better in my mind. Or in Houston's case, I think maybe they were just as good as Minnesota last year.
Sure.
Even though you might look at the playoffs and be like, oh, what? It's easy to forget that Houston was really good. So it's that kind of stuff. I don't look at like, yeah, right. I mean, they were the 2 seed and then they lost in 7 to a team that might have beat the Wolves if healthy. We don't know. I feel like Minnesota is in a fine spot, and like it's internal development, but also there could be that continuity bump. Like that's true, and it's not fun to talk about. And people go, roll your eyes at it. And I frankly oftentimes would too. But there is evidence of it now from 2 years ago that makes it impossible to discount. And like I said, I think it's for some of these guys, it's back to focusing on. It's not just developing, it's getting back to focusing on what matters most. And for me, like if they just came out with like an intentional, we want to win the championship like they had 2 years ago, we're going to do it by being a defensive team, and every night they come out and deliver that, then they're going to be really hard to beat. And I think they lost that. I think they lost their way in that last year to a large degree, and they played some better basketball down the stretch, but I think they have to recapture that identity. And if they do that, then yeah, they'll be really hard for anybody to beat, frankly.
Anything else Wolves related, or just like around the league from last night? We didn't talk about anything in the East, but I guess not as much.
Celtics. The Celtics. I definitely like when Tatum went down and whatnot. Even after the Drew Porzingis stuff, I was like, I still think they can be pretty good. And then I think it was something as simple as like Cornette leaving. I was like, oh, they are running out of depth pretty quick here. And Horford actually might sign elsewhere. Oh, okay, this might be more of a down year than I thought. The East is horrific.
That's when I bought my Garza stock.
Sure, right.
On the slow track thing, and I'm like, there's nobody there anymore.
Right,
yeah,
even if we like Luka, and we do, and even if he has a productive year, like that he's not like a major contributor on a good team, or a great team for sure. The East is going to be really bad. But there'll be a few top heavy teams, but like I think there'll be some teams where you don't even think they're a playoff team, and all of a sudden we get to the last 2 weeks of the year, and it's like they're right in the hunt for 6.
Detroit from last year.
Exactly. The door is going to be open for a lot of those teams. And going to make Chicago feel good about itself, even if it shouldn't. Like those kinds of things.
And I think Orlando and now Atlanta, even if they were to do that, wouldn't even be a surprise. I think that's the expectation. I think with those teams that they're probably competing for home court in the East over there, and New York probably shouldn't have too much change. I think Cleveland was elite last year. It's just the Achilles tendon teams stuff. Boston, Indiana, Milwaukee, man. It's
like, as much as we like Atlanta, if they were in the West, you'd be like, okay, probably 7 or 8. Playing team, but like be a tough first round series, and instead now it's like home court. Who knows? Maybe the Hawks come out of the East. Like that's the difference that you're in right now. And I would say for the Wolves, like at least the teams below them, like significantly below them, that I wouldn't have really thought to be contending with them next year, unless things go awry for Minnesota, like the Lakers, Clippers, etc. Like I don't feel like they have gotten better. Not that they necessarily even had pathways to. Like losing Dorian Finney-Smith and adding Laravia, like that's a downgrade in my mind of what they needed, specifically of like now who's going to guard anybody on your team. Like those teams. Like I do think there's been an even sharper divide of who's actually in contention to win things in the West and who's not.
Yeah, it seems like those 4 teams, and the Wolves are one of those 4 teams. And then it's a next tier down, and I'm sure one of those teams will prove us wrong, and it'll be like,
could be the Warriors. Who knows?
Like Houston did last year. We wouldn't have put Houston in the number 2 seed conversation, but I think it's fair to say, as of today, the Wolves are in that tier. If we expand the parameters of tier 2, even if you want to put Houston at the top of tier 2, the Wolves are in that group, and everyone else is below them, and it's going to be about internal development to grow there, provided they don't make some sort of
Splash.
Crazy move here and things change. I don't think the crazy splash being, signing a tax player mid-level guy is changes that much one way or the other for me. That's not going to be like, okay, now they're better than Houston.
Right.
This is kind of where I think we'll be at with the Wolves when we come into next season, and thinking about them as a home court advantage team, but with some serious competition up there at the top as well.
Yeah, and like this free agency, you re-sign your guys over the weekend, and then Monday comes, and you're like, my team going to do anything? And they don't. It's really boring. Like that specifically reminds me of 2 years ago when it was like they're not doing anything, and everybody had to be like, just pretend like Reid was a free agent, and they re-signed him. Like like that was our free agent or whatever. Like that really is the same boat they're in this year. Like that, there are plenty of parallels to draw from that. Yes, they went to the West Finals, but like regular season, that was kind of disappointing. And that's the same as 2 years ago, and except for that time they had a round 1 date with Denver.
Right.
Which they were pretty competitive before even losing in 5. So like there are a lot of things you can draw from that and be like, okay, there is a path for this team to come out and be better this next year, even while not seemingly doing anything and losing a key rotational piece.
And like I said, with Oklahoma City, man,
it's hard to do.
There'll probably be some hangover effects there too. They deserve to be, in tier 1, obviously above these teams.
Yeah.
But that was winning 68 games during the regular season is taxing, and playing the 2 7-game series in the postseason, including the last one being 7, like, yeah, you're talking about as taxed of a team as you can kind of get coming out of the playoffs. They're young, whatever, but yeah, I know you and I were texting about that all during the playoffs. Of like,
this is still going.
I know.
I literally, when I was like, the Wolves haven't played for 3 weeks and the finals are still going.
I know. Could have been us. All right, man. This was fun. This is it for listeners. We'll put a pause into free agency here. Britt and I are going to record tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon, as well. And if something else happens from there, we'll figure out something to talk about. But that'll be the last episode before 4th of July. Hopefully this and the previous episode with Kyle's kind of got us all caught up to date, and we'll keep moving as the Wolves move. But yeah, until Wednesday afternoon with Britt, he's Jace, I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Grinning hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.